I think as I was saying, the GW2 map instance chooser looks at group, friends list, guild, and choosing an instance. I think the bigger issue though is like a lot of times you want to, if you want to like meet people, or if you're not in a group, if you're not in an explicit group,
And you don't have any friends.
right, like there's a reason why, for example, the quicksand in Final Fantasy is kind of the place to go because it's kind of like the generic hangout.
It's hard to get your
But
foot in the door.
right, but if everything's heavily instanced and you don't have any connections to people already existing, it's hard to kind of meet those people that you need in order to kind of like it's hard to kind of meet new people that you need to kind of keep the instance or the RP that your group wants going.
Right, and then you also have to think about like the disposition of the people trying to find the groups. Because from my experience, most of the times role players are people who have social anxieties. So, not a lot of times, just from my observations. And so like they'll like hit a wall like that where they can't physically find the people, and they'll just give up because they're just like, oh, this is too much, social effort to find people.
And it's a little bit different than like if you're trying to find people for your raiding guild. Oh, well, I met somebody in a pug. I'm going to invite them to my static.
Right.
You essentially it's a question of like, how do you pug role playing? Because you kind of need to to mix with people, otherwise your group becomes stagnant. I mean, this is again and this kind of happens a lot of times with tabletop games. Like oftentimes you'll see groups will basically kind of swap games or swap who's running the game in order to basically just kind of get some variety in there. Because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, after a while it's gonna get stale.
Mm-hmm.
So like in RP, like how do you pug? How do you find the people that you want to recruit into your stack, your group? Or how do you make it feel like you're part of a living world? Trying to find other RPers.
Well, with the living world feature, obviously. Sorry. I did it bad. I apologize.
Right, and I mean, like you can still have, Dejara says you can fix the problem entirely by RPing in Divinity's Reach and Guild Wars 2. I mean, and I mean, like, yeah, you can still have like RP locations, but like, what if you want an RP that's basically like, going hunting for treasure, and you want there to be fishermen, nearby to give you, to interact with, to give you kind of hints about where to go, and like, oh, I heard old Joe, saw a treasure chest off the coast over there. Well, we're just poor fishermen, we're not going to go after ourselves. That's for adventurers like you to do. And, again, like this is basically just what I've heard from other people. I've never role played in Guild Wars 2, but I just heard people kind of complain about the mega servers really kind of killing a lot of the RP opportunity, because the other thing to keep in mind too is like you're running into the same people over and over again is basically how you kind of make friends. And so like if you're not rolling in, if you can't consistently run into the same RPers over and over again, how are you going to create those groups? How are you going to form the bonds that kind of make that allow you to kind of make the group?
Right. Because proximity is like there's a few psychological studies that have shown that proximity is the greatest factor in reaching out to people.
Right.
If you familiarity through proximity. If you constantly walk by the same person every day on the street, eventually you're gonna say hi to them.
Right. If you recognize them.
Right. And there's some level of familiarity, even if it's just walking by on the sidewalk every day.
Right. I think like Dejara was saying, he prefers single shard games, but it's technologically hard. The other problem though is like it's also a question of like running into a high enough density of the people that you want to play with. In a single shard game, you're throwing everybody into the same thing. I mean, the reason why we have role playing servers even in world, even if it were possible to have to basically like freely transfer between servers, is because you kind of want to you potentially want to attract the type of person to the server that's going to be interested in role playing, because role playing is basically a kind of for most MMOs is a niche activity. Like Final Fantasy has dozens of servers. But there's only like a small handful of RP servers, and kind of the idea is you want to basically get a critical mass of people there. They're going to do the thing you're interested in.
Yeah. And I think it's a little silly that they haven't designated official. I mean, I know Yoshi P's commented on that in the past about designating official RP servers, but it sounds more like, oh well, we're not doing that right now, so we're not going to.
Right. The problem with kind of official designation of servers is that then it becomes a question of like, well, how much are the developers going to enforce that then?
Right.
If somebody's kind of come along and being disruptive to RP, well, it's a little bit different, call the GMs, or even like reason to call the GMs if you're going to even a reason to call the GMs if it's like, well, we're on the role-playing server and you designated this a role-playing server, versus, well, we're on the role-playing server that the community is designated.
Right. I mean, that makes sense.
Dejara basically also says create an RP guild and advertise on Reddit. The problem is, of course, is that not only did you spell Reddit wrong, so then I can't get to the site, but that sorry, but then you're looking at the Venn diagram: people that play Guild Wars 2, people that role play, people that read Reddit. You're just potentially like limiting it down even more. It's possible that like a role-playing server gets a reputation. I mean, like, I knew Balmung was a role-playing server
by reputation.
I know that Moonguard and I think it's Worm Rest Accord are the RP servers in World of Warcraft.
Yeah, that's where
not because I've ever role-played on them, but because that's I know people who do role-play. Right. Oh, there's the stories. Yeah, Moonguard. Oh, Moonguard. Right, and so like it's a question of basically kind of getting the largest group possible, and sometimes I mean, like, think about your own experience, like in PvE content and in MMOs. Sometimes you don't know you like raiding. When you first started playing, maybe you didn't know you like raiding. We ran into some cool people, hung out, like, oh, where are you guys going? Oh, we're gonna go do this raid. Did you want to come? It's a learning raid. You seem pretty. We just did an instance together. You seem pretty competent. You want to come with us? Oh, sure, I'll give it a try.